In this lesson, we're going to implement nested routing, which is going to allow us change lesson description depending on which lesson we're going to click in this list of lessons. So the current playlist page will remain the same, but as we're going to click through these links, the right part of this page will be re-rendered, which we can achieve by using nested routes. And the URL structure of the lesson will be as follows. It will consist of playlist segment followed by dynamic segment of the playlist identifier followed by another static segment lessons, and finally there will be another dynamic segment which will correspond to the lesson identifier that we are currently viewing. Alright, before getting to the main implementation, I'm going to rename the component which corresponds to the playlist page. Just to make it clear what this dynamic segment will correspond to, I'm going to call it playlist slug instead. And this playlist component is going to act as a layout for lesson pages. And to actually let Nuxt know where those lesson pages have to be injected in this layout, I'm going to use component Nuxt page right here. So this part of the layout will be dynamic, and depending on the lesson is going to show different information, and the rest of markup on this page will remain the same. After doing this change, the main part of the playlist page is going to disappear, because we'll have to navigate to the proper lesson nested page first in order to see information about particular lesson right here. So what we'll have to do next is to actually move this playlist lesson component that has to show information about particular lesson into pages folder and turn this component into page component that is going to be managed by the Nuxt router. And to actually reflect URL structure of the lesson page, we'll have to move this component into the following folder. So starting from the pages folder, the directory structure is going to represent URL. Lesson URL is going to contain identifier of the playlist, represented by playlist slug name here. And another dynamic segment is going to represent lesson identifier in here. And now that we have properly configured directory structure to make this nested routing work, in order to navigate to this new page, I'm going to modify a link within playlist grid item component. We'll have to use proper address of the lesson page in here, so this second dynamic segment will be prettier, followed by static segment lessons, and as the last dynamic segment, I am specifying lesson identifier. For now, I'm just hard-coding all those identifiers for testing purposes. But eventually we're going to use variables for all those dynamic identifiers. Alright, cool. So on the playlist page, we're not seeing the lesson information because there is no lesson identifier in the address bar. And to properly navigate to the lesson page, we'll have to make the following route active, which requires a couple of dynamic segments. Let's specify those segments, press enter and make sure that we'll see lesson information on the page. And there we go, the address of the page was changed and we're seeing lesson information, and we can use any valid identifiers of lessons, and depending on those identifiers, Nuxt is going to show information about particular lesson on this page. And just to be able to navigate between different lessons of this playlist, by clicking those lesson links, I'm gonna open up the component which contains those links, and in here, let's use Nuxt link component instead of a text. And as for the address of those links, we're going to use the same address that we have used within playlist grid item component. And that is the address of the route that will render information about particular lesson. I'm just going to quickly replace all these list items, going to use Nuxt link component instead of a element, use proper addresses for to attribute. And just to have different addresses of lessons, I'm also going to modify dynamic segments in these addresses. But eventually all those addresses are going to come from the proper lesson objects. And for now, to test things out, it will be enough for us. So let's try it out. First of all, I'm going to click on the playlist link. We're supposed to be redirected to the playlist page, which is also going to show information about the first lesson of this playlist. And as you can see, all proper dynamic segments are present in the address line. And if I'm going to navigate around different lessons in this list, as you can see, the main part of this page is re-rendered, even though it shows the same information for now. But we can see that it's working, and dynamic segments in the address bar are properly modified as I'm clicking on those lesson links. But at the moment we're not clearly seeing which lesson link is currently active because it is not highlighted in the list. And that is something we're going to work on in one of the next lessons. The link to the source code of this project will be as always in the video description.